let's take a look at how we would trace a flat design on the Avancé embroidery machine. To start out, we want to use needle number 1 as a very good technique. And it also, if you use the same needle all the time, it becomes habit, which is a much better, much safer way of doing this. So anytime I'm starting a new job or I'm starting fresh for the day, I want to make sure I come up to the machine, press 1, that puts needle number 1 over the needle plate, and we refer to that as being in the sewing position. Whatever needle is over the needle plate is the one that we're going to use for our reference. Now, I like to take any of my round hoops. You do not have to use the size hoop that you're about to sew in. So I'm going to be sewing in a 15 centimeter, and for this I'm going to be using a 12, but this could just as easily be a 9 or a 20 centimeter hoop. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take an elastic band. I'm going to put it over one end, turn it 90 degrees, and put it over the other end. Make sure it's right in these corners. Snap it, and where it crosses over is the center of that hoop. Now, I'm going to take this, I'm going to put it on the machine, and I need to get that number 1 needle over where it crosses. So using the 4 arrow keys, which are my pantograph movement controls, I'm going to move this forward and to the left until I get it lined up. Now that's moving a little quickly, so by pushing the button in the center, I can change the speed at which that pantograph is moving. I can see that I'm on the faster speed because it has the double arrows. If I push the button in the center, I'm now on the single arrow, which is the slower speed. And now we just want to make sure that we get centered. You can see it's moving in much smaller increments now. Okay, once we have it centered, we want to tell the machine that that in fact is our center point. So first I'm going to put my actual garment on. Want to make sure I'm not sewing the front and back together. I like to run my hand inside. Okay. Now, to set that start point, it's not good enough just to go to that position. We have to tell the machine where that position is. So now, I press the home button, and using the arrow keys, I come down to set start and hit the enter button. Now I hit the enter button again. That assigns my center point. It's very important that you do that step. Now I hit the home button again, and we have 2 different traces in here. We have one called the contour range check, and we have one called the design range check. What the design range check does is it takes the furthest outmost points, the furthest X positions, left and right in the design, and the furthest Y positions, the top and bottom of the design, and it creates a rectangular box. So what I use this feature for is anytime I'm trying to line up with the top of a pocket. So I want to put a left chest logo here. Okay, think about what that's going to do. It's going to take the lowest part of the design and it's going to draw a straight line. So if I see that that straight line's not running parallel to the pocket, I know I need to rehoop the garment. If I see that it is running parallel, then I don't have to rehoop it. I know I'm ready to start sewing. When you do the other contour range check, it actually follows the outline. So if you have an irregularly shaped design, it's going to keep moving. It's not necessarily going to just make a straight line. So it makes it much more difficult to see. So that's why I like to use the design range check when I'm sewing above a pocket. For everything else, I like to use the contour range check. This is the accurate one, where it actually follows the shape of the design. And now I hit the enter button, and we watch the number 1 needle to make sure it stays within the area of the hoop. Now, clearly that design fits. But we're going to look at this again because I want you to see a close-up of what you really want to be looking at. You want to be watching this very carefully, and if you have to trace multiple designs, there's nothing wrong with that. So I'm going to go back into it again. Tracing of the design is the single most important thing we're going to do, because tracing the design is what prevents you from hitting hoops, therefore preventing you from doing damage to your machine. Now let's take a look at tracing a cap design for just the front of the cap, not for the front and both sides. We're going to approach the machine. We're going to press 1 on the keypad to put the number 1 needle over the needle plate. Again, we prefer that as a reference. The reason we like that as a reference, even if we're not using that needle in the design, is because it's out here at the end by itself, so it's one of the easiest ones to keep an eye on. Plus, if you constantly use the same needle, there's less chance that you're going to make a mistake because it'll become a habit using that same needle each and every time. Now, we want to center on this one. This is a 6-panel cap, so I want to center this to the center seam, left to right and front to back, between the front of the strap and the end of the cap driver here. I'm going to change the speed to the slow speed. Make sure it's centered. And now we're going to tell the machine that that in fact is our starting point. So we're going to go into Home, we're going to go to Set Start, and it's very important that we always set a new start point. So anytime we move the position, again, remember to set the start position. Now we go into Home, we go to Contour Range Check, which is the one that we always use on caps. And we're going to be watching the number 1 needle relative to the hat to make sure it's going to fit, and to watch the placement. Make sure it's not too high or too low on the cap. You never want to be watching this display. You always want to be watching the number 1 needle relative to the cap. Notice when I trace caps, I like to stand off to the side where the control panel is, because there's nothing in my way and I get a clear view. Very rarely are cap designs too wide. When they're wrong, they're usually too tall. So this really lets me see how tall the design is and exactly where it's going to be placed on that cap. And that's how we would trace the front of a cap. Now let's take a look at centering and tracing on a ball cap. The first thing we want to do when we approach the machine, we want to walk up to it and we want to press number 1. And what that does is that puts the number 1 needle over the needle plate. We refer to that as being in the sewing position. We are only using needle number 1 as a reference. Okay, even if needle number 1 is not being used in the design, it doesn't matter. It is there as a reference only for what we're about to do. The reason we prefer to use number 1 is because if we use the same needle number all the time, it becomes a habit, so there's less chance that we will make a mistake. Also, it's out here at the end by itself. If you're trying to watch a needle in here, it's very easy to be off by a needle, and now you're not tracing properly. So, good habit, go to the number 1 needle anytime we're starting a new design or starting up for the day. Now, I want to line up the number 1 needle with the center point of the cap. This happens to be a 6-panel cap, so I know left to right, I want to be right on the center seam. So, using the arrow keys, Okay, these move your pantograph. I'm going to move over to the left and forward until I get it close to the center. Then I'm going to change the speed. That's moving a little fast. I don't have a lot of control. So I press the center button, and now it's on the slow speed as indicated by the single arrow as opposed to the double arrow. Now, I like to pull the needle down, and I just want to make sure that I'm right on the center seam. So I'm off to the right a little bit. So I'll use the left arrow. Get it perfectly centered. And we also have to center front to back. Now the way I like to do that, I like to use the front edge of the strap, and I find, you can feel it, the front edge of the cap driver. And I want to be centered between those two places. So right about here is where I want the needle to be. And remember, we're looking at the needle. We are not looking at the presser foot. And that looks pretty good. So now I need to tell the machine that that in fact is our starting point. So I press the home button, and I come down and I go to set start, press the enter button, enter again. That now becomes our home position. Now we need to trace to make sure the design isn't too tall, too wide, as well as the placement of it. We don't want it too high on the hat or too low on the hat. So we're going to press the home button again. Now we're going to go down to contour range check, and we're going to press enter. It'll calculate, and we're watching the number one needle relative to the hat. Okay, now that I've traced that, I actually don't like the position of that. I feel that I'm coming a little too low on the hat. So I'm going to move the hat back a little bit. And I'm going to go back into home. And I'm going to go back to my set start, because of course I moved it. So I'm setting a new starting point. And I'm just going to trace it again. You want to keep doing this until you're comfortable with the trace. Okay, that looked excellent. So now that we know that that design is going to fit, now we're ready to start embroidering. Now, let's take a second look at this a little bit closer up so that we can really see the relationship of the number one needle relative to the hat. Now I like to take it one step further even. Okay, once I know that I'm not going to hit anything, I like to actually hold this down and do it again, because with it being closer to the hat, I get an even better idea of exactly where that design is going to land. Now at any point in time, if I feel that the needle is going to hit anything or the presser foot is going to hit anything, I can just let go of my finger and that needle is going to go right back up again. Okay, and that design fit perfectly. Okay, we've taken a look at how we would center and trace ear to ear sew out or 270 degrees sew out. We looked at how we would do a design just on the front. Now, what if somebody brings you a cap and it already has something on the front, and we want to put a name or a number or a flag or something on the side of the cap? If we want to do that, what we want to do is, again, make sure we're on needle number 1. And then we simply want to, using the pantograph movement control keys, roll the hat over to the side panel. And we want to center the number 1 needle on that side panel. And then trace. So I'm going to set the home position first. So I go to home, go down to set start, enter, enter, and now go to home, go to contour range check, and we're going to make sure it fits. Again, not only are we looking how it fits, we're also looking at the position of it to make sure we like that. Now I'm going to pull this down and I'm going to do it again to make sure I like the way it looks. Okay, and that looks excellent. If I didn't like the position, I would simply change the position of it, set the start point over again after you've moved it, and then retrace it. And that's the way we would do the side of a hat. When it comes to back of hats, we would do those flat. So we don't use the cap hoop for something like that. So now, taking a little closer look at this, again, we would spin the hat over to the side panel, and we simply want to center now on that side panel. Once we're centered on the side panel, we go to the home button, we go to set start, enter, enter to set that home position, then go into the home button again, go to the contour range check, and make sure the design is going to fit. I don't like to hold the presser foot down when I do the trace the first time, but I absolutely like to do the trace more than once just to be sure. So I go back to the contour range check. Okay, and the position of that looked pretty good. Now we're ready to start embroidering.